Another bloody affair that occurred under Ho Chi Minh's watch happened in 1968 during the so-called Tet Offensive in Hue. That year, the Communists launched a nationwide general offensive that hit 24 provincial capitals throughout South Vietnam, which killed 3/4 of the assailants and ended in unprecedented debacle.
On the eve of Tet, Radio Hanoi broadcast the following poem by Ho Chi Minh, which served as the code word for launching the attacks all over South Vietnam. This spring must surpass all previous springs, with victorious news cheering the whole country. South and North, we compete to defeat the U.S. bandits. Forward, total victory will be ours.
The only place they managed to hold for more than a few days was in Hue, the ancient capital of central Vietnam. In withdrawing from that city, however, they killed some 5,000 unarmed civilians, men and women, old people and children, even babies, besides other victims like religious leaders, foreign doctors, and university professors.
According to Dr. Lê Khắc Quyên, this kind of killing is something you'd find only in the Middle Ages. The trenches are set a little apart from one another. Each one holds between 10 and 20 persons. In these trenches, some are found standing, others lying, others yet sitting, in no particular order. When we dug these corpses up, the flesh and bones have already disintegrated, and on the corpses, one could still find the wires or cords used to tie them together.
Sáng ngày mùng 2 thì tôi nghe biết là Việt Cộng đã bắt đầu tràn vào thành phố Huế.
Father Phan Van Loi, who now lives in Hue, was a survivor of these horrible days during the Hue battle. A witness to some of the communist killings of civilians, he recalls members of his family and even his theological teachers. For instance, he recalls the case of Father Bu Dong was arrested and thereafter was found buried alive with a number of Catholic brothers who were with him. His remains were not discovered until November 1969, together with letters that he managed to write surreptitiously while in captivity.
Douglas Pike, the USIS scholar, in a report completed on February the 1st, 1970, later published as The Viet Cong Strategy of Terror, revealed that in just one battle in Hue during Tet 1968, nearly 4,800 civilians were killed or went missing. Pike identified 3 distinct phases for the execution in Hue. Phase 1 was a series of kangaroo courts of local ARVN officials. The highly publicized trials lasted anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, and the accused were always found guilty of crimes against the people. Phase 2 was implemented when the communists thought that they could hold the city long-term and consisted of a campaign of social reconstruction along Maoist dogma. Those who the communists believed to be counter-revolutionaries were singled out in this phase. Catholics, intellectuals, prominent businessmen, and other imperialist lackeys were targeted to build a new social order. The last phase began when it became evident that the communists could not hold the city and was designed to leave no witnesses. Anyone who could identify individual communist members who participated in the occupation were to be killed and their bodies hidden. While the population of South Vietnam was drenched in blood and mourning during Tet 1968, in North Vietnam, the authorities organized huge mass meetings to celebrate their victories in the so-called General Offensive and General Uprising.
Ho Chi Minh is dead since 1969, but his legacy lives on, especially in the continued rule of a Communist Party which elsewhere has mostly passed into history. That is why we probably need to assess his legacy, as it still impacts the history of Vietnam and current and future generations of Vietnamese.
Well, at one point he gave them hope. That hope was not fulfilled. He gave them terror. He used the extraordinary courage of the Vietnamese. I've seen a certain number of people at war, and both the South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese soldiers were quite extraordinary. Even if it is fashionable now to say that the South Vietnamese was a very bad army, that is obviously not true. The legacy is probably a great hunger for economic well-being and puzzlement at the way the world is changing and evolving around them, and also the feeling that they are somehow historically and geographically cornered. Mm-hmm. One day, Galbraith, the Lord has his soul, said that Vietnam, if we, the Americans, hadn't made so many mistakes, should go back to the nothingness it richly believes, it richly deserves. In other words, that culture is not all that important, and anyway, it's been bothersome and troublesome. And leave aside there the fact that Iraq has often been talked as a new Vietnam, which is obviously nonsense. It's not at all the same situation. People are confused, disinformed, puzzled, not only by Asia, not only by Vietnam, but also by Ho Chi Minh's personality. He seems to be easier to draw and to paint than understanding the general situation.
At the present, Vietnamese society can be said to be thoroughly corroded. The Vietnamese, both inside and outside of the Communist Party, have become immoral, for the party has turned everyone into a liar and a cheater. The word patriotism no longer means anything. Vietnam is being stuck with China in regard to the Paracel and Spratly archipelagos. It will take at least 2 generations before Vietnamese society can recover. Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party Politburo, in launching the Vietnam War, have caused untold hatred and enmity amongst the population. The southern Vietnamese population is not only outraged by what the CPV did to them, oftentimes they mistake the target and pour all their hatred onto their unhappy northern compatriots.
So there's all these kind of lies that are lies over lies that make it impossible for the regime in Hanoi not to, add lies to lies. Because once you start lying, you cannot stop. And that is one of the worst legacies that it can leave for your country, and especially for the youth who need to know the truth about history.